So we are in my office, and we have a couple of new students here, and we have people who are curious here, and we have Nikita, the member of your group, so he's videotaping me. And I hope you have access to the first video which we did on Monday. Today's subject is testing of graphic user interface. Let's go to the first informative slide of the slideshow. Graphic user interface testing, what is that? The applications, besides their functionality, they have certain look. And some applications look ugly, some applications look very nice, some applications are easy to navigate, some applications are difficult to navigate. And it is a very big issue. Prior to graphic user interface we have today, it was done differently. We will talk about it when we look at the next slide. But so far, why we learn graphic user interface, why I want you to know graphic user interface a little bit. You're not going to be gurus, but still, you come to the company, and you remember from the previous session, when you come to the company, they give you a couple of weeks at least to learn the product. You do not report anything, means they do not expect you to report anything. They understand you need time to learn the product. And from the day one, you start reporting software defects. They are not going to be functionality defects. They are going to be graphic user interface defects. You don't have to know anything about how the application works to talk about how it looks. Guys, you see how it looks from the very first second when you just start looking at the application. And that is one advantage. So it gives you certain credit. It helps you to keep the job, because people look at you from the day one and say, wow, look at that new girl or new boy. She reports so many bugs just from the day one. It's kind of unusual, really. So it gives you some credit. And I'm not saying you need the credit, but God forbid you might need the credit. You know? Why don't you have a credit? It also helps you to get a job. You remember what we learned in that class is how to get a job and how to keep the job. How does it help you to get a job? If you are able to talk nicely, in a smart way, in a decent way about graphic user interface, you will amaze people. So my job is to show you what to talk about and how to impress them. So it might also help you to get a job. And it doesn't take to be a rocket scientist to understand the graphic user interface issue. It's simple, really simple. Another thing which makes it simple: all the rules, all the standards, all the recommendations, specifications, everything is published. It doesn't require any creativity on your site. You look, you research, you do some God knows heroic stuff. You don't have to be a hero. You just open the standard and learn it. And it is waiting for you, actually, and for many other people who would never open that standard. Not many people know about existence of the graphic user interface standards, which is something. It gives you certain advantage over that people. They just do not report graphic user interface problems. You get some area which other people just don't know how to report problems in. Graphic user interface issues are normally not given much of attention by many companies. Sometimes the reason is financial. They are saying, guys, we are short in financing, we have to come up with a product, so let's focus on severe functionality problems. Even if it is minor functionality problems, they are not going to look at it. It happens. Most of the companies, though, they pay attention to smaller things. And especially if you deal with a mass market application with hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of people using it, they do want the applications to be nice looking and being consistent with other applications. Let me give you my kind of story about that. Think about ancient Rome. Okay, there was an empire, there was a culture. Some people, we don't have that nation anymore. People who live in Italy now have nothing to do with ancient Romans, if you think about it. They look differently, they speak different language. What happened to ancient Rome? It was captured and populated by barbarians coming from the northern Europe. So the culture changed. The culture of today's Italy has nothing to do, with culture of the ancient Rome. I mean, you might see some sculptures around, but still. And I'm trying to make a parallel with graphic user interface. Prior to web applications, invasion, we used to deal with Windows applications primarily, and there was a culture in Windows applications development. It was like an ancient Rome of software development. There was a culture. Developers knew the rules, testers knew the rules, and most of the Windows applications were pretty good in terms of graphic user interface. Now we've got barbarians, we've got web applications world invading the universe of software testing, or of software development and testing. And then we've got barbarians, we've got people who have no idea about rules of the game, graphic user interface game. Moreover, the barbarians are coming from all over the world. They're not local anymore. Sometimes they do not understand much the language, and very often they are far away. You cannot really communicate to them much. So kids, 17 years old, 18 years old, 20 years old, they might be senior level, developers now in today's world. They read a couple of books, do a couple of projects. They are seniors now. Do they care about graphic user interface? Do they care about users? So it is so common, it is so devastating. It creates huge, enormous opportunity for you, because you're not expected to do much of Windows applications testing. You will be working primarily with either web applications or mobile applications. In web applications part of the world, which is huge, graphic user interface are neglected dramatically, grossly neglected. And that is why we are talking about that, because it gives you certain advantage over other people who have no idea about very existence of that issue. We have some historical kind of overview. The window in the middle of my screen is a DOS simulation window. That is how it looked in DOS, and pretty much how it looked in Unix. It is called command line type of interface. So what is command line? I type here, I'm saying cd ... which means move me up in the hierarchy, one level up, boom, and it types back. I'm doing again cd ... type, and it types back. Then I say dir, so show me all the files and folders, and it gives me all the files and folders. That is how it used to work, and still is working in DOS. We discussed that at some point most of the users were kind of advanced people who felt pretty much okay working with that kind of interface. But then when computing became a mass market thing, so it moved to easier to deal with interfaces. So first it was Macintosh, so Apple with Mac operating system, and then later it was Windows, Microsoft, who joined that trend with Windows operating system. They are graphic user interface operating system. So we've got menus, we've got drag and drop operations with mouse, we've got dialog boxes, icons, desktops, and all we know about that today, it came at that pretty much that time. It changed a little bit. It became maybe a little bit more convenient, but still the foundation was built 25, even more years ago. Graphic user interface. Companies which develop operating systems, Microsoft and Apple, came up with their guidelines on how applications should look like to create decent user experience. So as a user, if you use 25 different Windows applications, you do not want to learn how to save a file in each and every application. There should be some kind of unified way of doing that, no matter which application you are using. So that is the job of Microsoft, and that is the job of Apple as companies who are responsible for operating systems, to come up with their own guidelines. And they did come up with the guidelines. There is a book, actually, the Microsoft book on graphic user interface. There is another book which is available online if you go to www.usability.gov. It's a government website. It belongs to US Department of Health and Human Services. There is a book there on graphic user interface guidelines. My suggestion to you is go there and download that book, because you never know what's going to be there next week, or what's not going to be there next week. So that's what I would I always do. Is if I see something valuable, I make sure I have a copy. So we have official guidelines published by US government on one hand for web applications, and by Microsoft for Windows applications. There is another one for Macintosh, Mac operating system. And one more time, we are saying that web applications overall are developed badly in terms of graphic user interface, and the better you know the recommendations and standards and guidelines, the more bug reports you can submit. And another thing is, when you learn it, internalize it, it becomes a part of you. You learn it by using, you do not learn it by memorizing, you do not learn it by kind of purely academic activity. You learn it by doing, and that is what our goal is in that in today's session and in our homework. We move to the next slide. So what's in the books? So we have two books which I mentioned. So what's in there? First of all, we have graphic user interface concepts. It's not enough to understand one rule or even 10 rules or maybe 20 rules. If you understand concepts, you will see problems even if you don't know exact rules, but you will see the problem. You will say, wait a second, we have to go and find out, and then you open the book and you find the exact rule, but you have to understand the concept. So the books have concepts. Then another thing which is extremely valuable is terminology of graphic user interface. Why it is important? Because you write bug reports. When you write bug reports, you have to use specific technical terms. Otherwise, nobody understands you. And normally, the books are coming with appendices, and one of the appendices will be the glossary explaining the terms. But even if there is no glossary, so the book itself explains the terms. In web GUI book, which is published on usability.gov website, one of the appendices is 400 items checklist for testing web pages. Imagine you have an application, you look at that application, it has, let's say, 200 pages, and you have 400 items to apply to that application, and lots of those items you can apply to each and every page separately. And that list is sorted by relative importance. So the most important things and things which you might not necessarily even apply because it's too minor if you don't have extra time and so on. There is a danger here, by the way. I know a couple of people who became, how to say, who became really paranoid about graphic user interface up to the extent of not paying attention to other areas. They do not pay much attention to functionality testing, for example. They are just absolutely upset with graphic user interface. It's not good. In software testing, we have to do many different types of testing, and if you know GUI, it's good. because you can write more bug reports. But if you limit yourself to GUI testing, you're in trouble. You cannot grow professionally, and you will have no respect and no real career if that happens. And I've seen people to whom it happened. It's easy, guys. It's easy. It's so attractive. You learn a couple of things, you get a job, and you're happy, and you make some money, and then you might change the job a couple of times, and then you say, God, my life is done. You know, it didn't even start yet. So don't be paranoid about graphic user interface. It's important, it's cool, but it's, you know, it's a dust on your shoes if you think about yourself as a tester. So 300 pages of the book, web application testing book, with lots of graphics. I would say maybe graphics and comments might be half of the book. So even 300 pages is not exactly what you have to read. So half of that is just pictures, which you look at, and they illustrate the ideas and concepts expressed in that book. I'm trying to give you an idea of how valuable the book is. So I'm selling that book to you, meaning, guys, read it, do your best. Yeah? Then certain things in Windows applications, pretty much the same in both Windows and web-based applications. We will look at that. Certain things are different. We are not trying to focus on Windows applications here. We are trying to focus more, I would say, on web-based. But still we look at the similarities, and on that slide we are looking at Windows on the left and web on the right. So what is an equivalent of web application homepage? What is the equivalent on Windows side? Application window. It's called main application window. So you run Notepad, you run WordPad, you run any application, your browser. So and you have that main application window. The equivalent of that on the web is homepage. Then in Windows, how do you actually operate the application? You go to menus. Menus open dialog boxes, and you provide data to the dialog boxes, and then things happen. Functionality is implemented that way. What are equivalents of dialog boxes on the website, web applications? Pages, just web pages. And the rules, we will look at certain rules which are applicable to dialog boxes, and we will see how those rules are applicable to web pages. It is coming in the next slide. Controls. Controls, down below it explains, controls are what you manipulate in applications. So text field, edit box, same thing. Check boxes, list boxes, combo boxes, buttons, radio buttons, links, menu items, menu titles, menu items. All those are controls. That is how users manipulate the application. So controls are coming with certain rules in terms of graphic user interface. So we will learn a couple of rules about controls, not many. Dialog box and or / web page graphic user interface rules. First rule says disable controls if cannot use them. You know, guys, I will probably run some application here. Let me run Notepad, for example. Okay, I hope you can see what I'm doing here. First of all, we look at menus. Let's say edit, undo, cut, copy, delete. Menu items are disabled. Why they are disabled? Because as a user, it makes no sense, you know, for me to use it. I cannot undo anything. I didn't do anything. I cannot delete. There is nothing to delete. So those menu items are disabled. We are talking about dialog boxes. Okay, let's say, let me type Mike here, and then I go to edit, find. Find next button is disabled. Why is it disabled? Because I didn't type anything in the find what box, if I type just one single character, let's say M, see, the find next button now is enabled. I can push that button. It says cannot find, well, whatever the reason. So it illustrates the idea of controls getting disabled. So disable control if cannot use them. Controls if cannot use them. That is an overall rule of graphic user interface. It's whichever control. It does. We are not talking about controls of certain type. We are saying whichever control cannot be used, make sure it is disabled. And that rule is violated frequently, even in web Windows applications, and even if you think about, let's say, no, Microsoft. Guys, Microsoft, is it a good company? Do they have lots of money? Do they actually publish the rules of graphic user interface? Look at Microsoft. They say, okay, let's make it empty. Okay, no data typed in the notepad, and it says edit, select all. Select what? There is nothing to be selected there, but it says select what? Then it says replace. Replace what? There is nothing to replace. If I go to replace, well, so the buttons are disabled, yeah, it's good, but you know what? There is nothing to replace. It's empty. So technically, I shouldn't be able to see that dialog box, replace dialog box. It should have it disabled. You will see that in, issues like that, you will see them not just in Microsoft applications, everywhere. So Microsoft is pretty good, by the way. So if Microsoft has issues like that, so then what can you expect from other companies? Then we are talking about default button. Default button. In dialog boxes, let's open some dialog box. Let's go to Notepad again and say font. Default button is the button which will be pressed if I hit enter button on my keyboard at the time right after the dialog box opens. I say format, font, dialog box opens. I don't touch anything yet. And OK button, if you look at the OK button, it has some frame around the button. And that frame indicates it is a default button. So cancel does not have that frame. It is just OK button which has the frame. So it is a default button. If I push the enter button on my keyboard, it will press the OK button. So what are the problems? The problems are, first of all, some dialog boxes might not have default button, which is rare in Windows applications world, very rare. But guys, if you look at web-based applications, if you think about forms which you fill out every day online, open that form, do nothing, hit enter, and see what's going to happen. Most likely nothing is going to happen. There is no default button there. And it should be there. This is the rule of graphic user interface. It doesn't matter in which type of screen it is implemented. I am still same user. Okay. So one of the big problems of web applications, specifically forms on the web, is they have no default button at all. Which field gets default input focus? Rule number 3. You have to look at the dialog box, or you have to look at the online form, and you have to say, guys, there's going to be a field, most likely, which gets default input focus. What is default input focus? You open the form, you open the dialog box, you start typing. Let me ask you, let me go to, let's say, Notepad, and I'm saying File, Save As. Dialog box opens. So guys, let me unmute you. Unmute. Can you hear me? Hello? Yes. So guys, you are looking at the dialog box on my screen. And we are talking about default input focus. So default input focus is where my typing goes. I start typing and my typing goes into a certain field. In your mind, which field is it going to be? File name. How do you know that? What? Yeah, it has selection, and it's flashing a little bit. If you look at the right, so the pointer is flashing. So that is the indication of the field which accepts default typing. So, and it is called, one more time, it is called default input focus field. Sometimes it might not make any sense. Then there is no problem. If it does make sense, the question you ask yourself is the default value. The default value. We are looking at the very last bullet, which says provide default values to the fields if appropriate. Can you see? Default values. In our case, default value was .txt. It didn't have any name because the file was not saved. If I save the file, it will offer the existing file name as a default value. But nobody says that this default value is right or that default value is right. People who design your product and develop your product, they make decisions. You are on the testing side, you make sure decisions are solid decisions. If something bothers you or you suspect there might be different or better default value, just do it. So is it, guys, what we are talking about? Is it kind of simple, easy to understand, or you are thinking, what is he talking about? It's easy. Yeah, guys, should be good. Okay, good. I mean, I know that. I'm just making sure we are on same kind of platform and that. Okay, good. I will mute you again. Okay. Tab order. Tab order is a very common issue in dialog boxes, and so what does it mean? If you open a dialog box, let me open a dialog box for you. Okay, here is a dialog box. Maybe something simpler. Replace. Okay, here is the dialog box. If I see right now, the focus is in find what field. We have M, character M selected there. So what happens if I push the tab key? The input focus moves. Now it moves to the replace with field. Then I push tab button again, and it goes to match case checkbox. By the way, if I want to really toggle the checkbox, I don't have to use mouse. I can do it by of the keyboard. I can just push the space. See, and what you see around the match case here. So the match case has some frame around, and the line made around the match case is called dotted line. DOT, dotted line. Okay, it shows you where the input focus is. So what kind of input? At least I can type space into that. So I can type space, one more space, one more space. See, space toggles the value of the match case checkbox. Then I do tab again, and the input focus moves to find next button, and you can see that find next button has dotted line now. Then I do tab again, it goes to replace, then one more tab, replace all, one more tab, cancel, one more tab, it comes back to find what. If you want to tab in opposite order, you do shift tab. See, it goes back. How do people learn about the existence of those, navigation techniques? At least there is a book on Windows Graphic User Interface published by Microsoft. So I learned that from this book whatever, 15, 16 years ago, 17 years ago. So there are books, and if you want to learn how to do that, you are very welcome to read the book. Coming back to the rules, the rule says tab order should be either logical, let's say last name, first name, title, company, whichever form you fill out. It is very convenient to user, instead of taking mouse and clicking, on the field, just doing tab and it goes to the next field. We just keep typing. We type, tab, types, next field, tab. So lots of people are using tabs when they fill out forms. And the rule, graphic user interface rule says order is either logical, so it makes sense from the business standpoint, or if that is not the case, it should be going left to right, top to bottom. That is the case. And I can show you an application where it is not exactly the case. I know one. Let me show you. It is one of the projects we are going to do at some point. Let's say I am here in first name and I'm saying Mike, tab. Oop. Instead of last name, it moves me to the referred by field. I'm saying, okay, referred by Nikita, our employee. Then I do another tab. And then it moves me to the last name, Portnov. So we have a very clear violation of the tab order rule in that specific web form. It might happen in dialog box, it might happen in web graphic user interface, it does matter. So I think we covered the dialog box rules. And one more time, and it is very important, the 5 rules we just talked about are shared by dialog boxes in Windows applications, and same 5 rules are severely neglected, severely, up to amazing extent in web applications. Anytime you will look at any form on the web, you will see enormous amount of violations of that rule. Another thing I want you to understand when we talk about graphic user interface, let me mute you. Coming back to the religion of software testing, and I told you last time, religion of software testing is requirements. And we never have enough requirements. Sometimes you come and there is nothing, and you say, oh God, there is no requirement. Sometimes you come and you get 3 piles like that, and I mean huge piles, and you start working with huge piles, and you realize that half of that is obsolete and another half is missing. So when it comes to graphic user interface, the situation is a little bit, I would say, different, because whichever company you work for, they do not have their own graphic user interface requirements. So the maximum, they say, okay, we want to, to be really consistent with Microsoft guidelines, this and that. But then what happens, there are certain features which company wants to be similar to specific competing products maybe, or not necessarily competing. I remember we did a project here, and their marketing manager comes to the school, and I'm asking him, okay, so what are the formal requirements? And he takes out of his briefcase, he takes a poster, and he says, it says everything here. I said, okay. And then I'm saying, okay, is there any application you want to be looking like? Because my concern is, if you think about graphic user interface and you have a doubt, then if there is another application which we want to be like, you just look at another application and you write a bug report. So you know the standard, you know what to follow. And I said, so is there any application you want to be like? He says, Michael, we want to be unique, we don't want to be this. I said, okay, but in terms of how things look, he says, oh, absolutely, we want to be like Google. If you have any doubt about how certain things should be implemented when it comes to graphic user interface, he says we want to be like Google. Is it a decent answer? Absolutely. They want to be like Google. They don't want to be like any competing application. But when you start working and it comes to graphic user interface, first time you have a doubt, just ask your manager. And but you cannot ask questions in terms of, you cannot create problems. You come with solutions, you offer a couple of solutions. That is what everybody likes. Just remember, guys, you cannot come to management people, and bother them with your problems. You come to them with options of solutions. And you say, listen, that specific feature in our product it is done this way, but if we look at, let's say, Microsoft Word, it is done that way. If you look at Google, so they do it this way. Which way do you want to go? I mean, is there any product we want to be like? Your manager, it will take them maybe 1 microsecond to answer. So they know, management people know that. Just ask them. And what you have to understand about requirements. Some requirements are coming from written documentation. Some requirements are coming from the industry, from the real life. Let's say there is a company and that company implements certain feature and it is a first feature, it's cool. Someone has a cool feature or someone has a cool, whatever, graphic user interface solution. Is it your requirement? No, it is nice to have. But then what happens, more and more companies start using it. And then it becomes must-have. It's not nice-have anymore, it's must-have. Why? Because users expect that. So requirements are coming not just from your company or your client or this and that. Requirements are also coming from the industry. Not necessarily in graphic user interface. It might be in functionality, it might be in certain features as well. But graphic user interface is a lot about how other companies do things. So, to start with, you have books and guidelines, and then you have the industry. That is why being a good tester means you have to be a good user. Power user. You have to know the applications, I mean multiple applications, because you bring to the product you test something you learn being a user of other applications. Now guys, let me finish the presentation so we can go to the homework.